Welcome into the Hard Count, fresh off our travels from Atlanta, Georgia, back in the studio. And you would think with the season being over, hey, those guys are probably taking their foot off the gas. They're probably not talking quite as much ball. You'd be so wrong. It is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025, last one on the face of the planet. Cato and I talking before we got in the studio. Feels like yesterday was supposed to be a Sunday because of the game being played on a Monday, but it's supposed to be a Saturday in our minds. So we're kind of all turned around. But the sport of football, the sport of college football, just continues to charge on. The AP poll dropped. The last one did, at least. Got some thoughts on that. Want to do a year in review together. Top 10 quarterbacks in college football next year if we're talking returning starters. Break that down for you a little bit later. Hey, could Ohio State repeat? I don't think it's nearly as crazy as some folks might assume given all they're going to lose from this year's national title team. So if you're not subscribed, welcome, baby. I mean, we have a lot of people dialing during the regular season, and then some of the maybe not so diehard folks, season ends and say, all right, you know what, that was fun. I'm going to go and watch whatever the sport I was watching. I'll go watch Netflix or whatever. No, if you're a college football sicko, we're glad to have you here. We're glad to have you subscribed. So let's start with just kind of taking a look behind us before we look forward. This was a wild year in college football. A lot of newness, right? You had the expanded playoff. We had the portal and NIL apparatuses start to kind of make their presence felt more than I think really ever before in the sport. And going into the year, for me at least, I felt a little bit apprehensive as to what we were going to experience. Because for me, one of the things that I love so much about college football, one of the things that we all love about college football that makes us love this sport more than the other professional sports is the sport has a soul. You know what I mean? Like there's some emotion to it. There's a certain vibe to it. There's a certain part of this that isn't super polished with a massive a front office behind it, which, again, we're kind of starting to veer further away from that sort of model. But that's kind of where I'm going with this. I was nervous about the emotion, the soul of the sport, and what it would look like as we jumped into the heavy portal, heavy NIL, and 12-team model, which, again, starts to resemble a lot more of the professional model. And I left, I think, very pleasantly, not surprised, but I think very pleasantly grateful at what college football is right now and the way that it's, I think, kind of sticking its heels in the ground against some of these maybe more corporate ideals. Like, there was no better example of this for us. We talked about it the Sunday after. Like, rivalry weekend was absolutely electric. And not just from the games, because they're always going to be awesome. Anytime you put Michigan and Ohio State on the same field, it's going to be great. You put Arizona State, Arizona on the same field, it's going to be awesome. But, again, the emotion of it. You're worried, hey, these guys are changing jerseys, it feels like every other season. Are they still going to care about that school at the logo they have on the side of their helmet? Is that still going to matter to them that they go to Notre Dame? Is it still going to matter to them that they go to a USC, an Ole Miss, an LSU, wherever? And based on what happened, I'm not endorsing it necessarily, but based on the emotion we saw post-game, a lot of those rivalries, yeah, it still matters to these kids. There's still a soul within college football. We talk a lot about all these kids that make so much money, and y'all, I've said it before, I'm pro these kids getting paid what they're worth. This is not an anti-NIL take by any stretch of the imagination, but this is, I think, making sure we're all aligned. The soul of college football is still in a good place. There's still the emotion. There's still the care for these college kids that grew up going to Oklahoma games as a kid, and they go to Oklahoma, and they walk on, and it means everything to them to be out there on that field wearing that crimson and cream. So that was my first takeaway. The other takeaway I had, as we look at kind of what this AP poll is presenting to us, Ohio State, we said it during the playoff, if they win the national championship, it will be the most legit national title run of all time when it comes to what they did in the playoff. That's only further validated by this AP poll, man. Like, Ohio State ranked number one, no does, they're the champs, but look at the four teams ranked behind them. Ohio State beat every team ranked in the top five. They beat 6 of the teams ranked in the top 10. So if there's any conversation to be had around Ohio State and the validation around this year with the 12-team playoff, I know they've lost to Michigan, lost to Oregon. I get it. I hear it. But we can't retroactively change the rules and say, well, that national championship only counts, because it was the 4-team model. That 12-team model, we don't really give any mind to that. That national title to us doesn't count. You can't do that. It's like saying if Steph Curry didn't exist during the three-point line era, that he wouldn't be a great player. No, we don't do that. That's not what this is all about. And so the AP poll, again, further emphasizing what they did during the regular season, the teams that they beat. I think that's probably important, and I think, again, it further validates the idea that Ohio State, they were just a one of one this year, man. when they caught their stride, game, set, match. I want to go back to what we talked about with the portal, though. When you look at this top 25, this final top 25, a lot of teams, a lot of logos where you're like, they had success because of a portal ad here. Or maybe they went pretty heavy on the portal, or maybe they kind of flipped the roster in a certain extent. Go back and check the transfer portal team rankings at all3.com. 11 of those teams that were ranked in the top 25 of the transfer portal rankings finished in the top 25 of the AP poll. Coincidence? I think not. I think this is just further validation if you are talking about the way that rosters are evolving and moving and shaking. Like, the transfer portal is continuing to show itself as a non-negotiable. You don't have to major in the portal, but you better participate. You better at least show up to class and get your participation points if you want to have success at the highest level in college football. That's not the only way that you can do it. But again, seeing this play itself out here, I think it's going to probably become a larger number, quite frankly, as we look to the future here, future seasons in college football. 11 of the top 25. Darn near half. Not great with numbers, but darn near half the top 25. You got to be in the portal, man. So talking about the future of this sport, as we kind of give a year in review of what 2024 was. Again, I thought it was awesome. I thought the product was awesome. And I think it's best for us now as college football fans in an era where a lot's changing and a lot's still going to change around the portal calendar and around what the playoff's going to look like. It's best for us to just kind of be open-handed with this. And that sounds a little bit bizarre because it's something that we all love so much. No, we're not going to be open-handed with it. We're going to fight for it. We're going to hold on tight to it, and we're going to be very staunchly opposed to anything that's against this sport. So I hear that part of it. But what I would also say is let's enjoy the fact that the game is in a spot where it's getting a lot of exposure, which, again, I'm not the guy talking about TV ratings and revenue and all that. That's not really my take. But I do think the fact that college football, again, still has that emotion, still has that soul, and now more people are getting to see that as it evolves. Would it be my first choice that we expand the playoff? No, but am I upset that this generation of kids is able to see what a home playoff game looks like? I'm also not upset with that. So, one more thing here. This year to me was a lot like one movie from a series. I like movie series as much as the next guy. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, I mean, you name it. This was just one movie. I thought it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. You could argue this was one of the first movies of a new era in this series. But where we are right now and where we're going to be in 3 years, very, very different. So enjoy what this movie was, but also understand now this is not the finale. Like, this is not the final resting place of what we're going to know college football to be for the next 20 years. Constantly evolving, constantly changing, and we can be against the change. I'm not saying that's the wrong take to have, but I do think it's okay for us to say, you know what, as long as those things that make college football still unique from every other sport on the face of planet Earth and still makes it the best sport on the face of planet Earth, we're cool with that. We're cool with that, and I'm still cool with that. Curious to hear your thoughts, though. Get at me in the comment section, at me on Twitter, Instagram, at JD Pakel. Let me know just your overall take on the AP poll and your take on the year that was in the greatest sport, again, on the face of planet Earth. Now, this show gets to cover the greatest sport on the face of planet Earth, brought to you by our friends over at Huel. You've heard me talk about Huel a few times now. Brand new year, all about setting goals, actually hitting them. That's why I want to talk to you today about today's sponsor, Huel, spelled Huel, the global complete nutrition brand trusted by millions. Their Black Edition ready to drink is a complete meal in a bottle, high in protein, low in sugar, and packed with all the nutrients your body needs to perform at its best. We said it on the last show. Really, the end of the national title game is like college football New Year. You got some resolutions, got some goals. Let's lock in with Huel. New customers can try it for 15% off plus a free gift using my exclusive code HardCount15. Again, HardCount15, 15% plus a free gift for new customers. I'm telling you, man, as someone who has used this product, enjoy it, and can co-sign it, and again, the people at Huel bringing out the show today, we appreciate them. We appreciate y'all for locking in and using that code. So we were in Atlanta, myself and Cato, and it was awesome, dude. So cool to see all the fans that traveled. Ohio State, by the way, felt like to me, Cato, 60%, 65%. I mean, like that. It felt like a Buckeye takeover of sorts in Atlanta, and it was so cool to be out there, so cool to meet so many of y'all, and so cool to cover the game. And the confetti drops. You see Ryan Day throw his headset into the stands, and that was so cool. But as the dust settles, it's hard for us to not ask this question. Can Ohio State run it back? I think that is very, very possible. And you look at what the FanDuel odds are to win the national title in 2025 right now. Yes, you can already go check those out. Ohio State currently has the best odds. Now, will that be the case in a couple of months? I don't know. But people are going to push back on that very quickly. And I hear where you're coming from and say, wait, JD, hey, listen, I get you got to make your money, Las Vegas, Nevada, and build some more skyscrapers by taking advantage of these folks that think Ohio State's going to run it back with all they lose. But again, they lose a lot, man. I'm not pushing back. They do. Lose your quarterback. You lose some weapons in the backfield, more than likely. Again, this is all per my assumption. Lose some key pieces on defense in a Jack Sawyer, Tuimoloau, Cody Simon. There's some massive pieces to lose now that made your season last year what it was. I think more importantly, the thing that would make me a little bit nervous from a Buckeye fan is like you lose some temperature-setting guys. Like Jack Sawyer is the emotional heartbeat of that whole operation. With him not being there, somebody else got to pick that up and be the new personality of that team and bring the new juice for that team. I'm not saying that won't happen, but I am saying Jack Sawyer's got some pretty massive shoes. I would probably guess he might be in the teens, Cato. He might be like a teen size when it comes to his shoe size. That's a lot. That's a lot to replace. So I say that, and I feel that way, and I think that's accurate, but I also still can't help but look at what Ohio State has on this roster and look at what we've known to be true about Ohio State. Since Ryan Day's been there, even before he's been there, it's like, man, it's still Ohio State. It's still Ohio State. And this isn't just me giving love to the logo. No, I think the logo in itself is iconic in a lot of ways. I don't think that's a discussion. There's nothing but top 5 recruiting classes currently on the roster at Ohio State. You bring back 2 of the best players, I think the top 2 players in all of college football next year, in Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. We'll see what happens with the coordinator position. That's always a discussion around, will the NFL try and take one of these guys, or will, I know there's smoke around Oklahoma and Jim Knowles at one point in time. As of right now, as we sit here live on the air with Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles, both being your coordinators offensively and defensively, I think that's the best coordinator combo in all of college football. So you have that. The quarterback position, yeah, you lose Will Howard, and that's going to be tough, but like Julian's saying, it's a number 2 quarterback for us in this previous class. Top 10 quarterback in the 2023 cycle in Lincoln Keenholz. Like, they got some options, okay? So they're not going to be wanting, I don't believe, at the quarterback position. And to be real, man, Ohio State, like talent, even when they weren't winning national championships, that was never the problem. Even last year, and everyone's dunking on Kyle McCord after the Michigan game, Kyle McCord just lit up college football and led the country in passing this year. So again, talent, was never a problem for Ohio State. So what was the problem? What was keeping them from winning those national championships? A lot of the time, you're pointing the finger at Ryan Day. For better or for worse, that was kind of where the college football public would look. Hey, Ryan Day, I don't know if he's the guy. He's not from Ohio. There's kind of this soft culture around Ohio State. And I'm not really even sitting here telling you that Ryan Day didn't have some acclimating to do. I think by nature of what he did this offseason by passing off play calling duties, he feels like he had to acclimate and change. But y'all, they did change. They did reach the mountaintop. He is the guy. They did win the national championship. All those things are true now. And so we said this post-game, and I want to say it again. Sometimes it just takes doing it once to kind of get the hang of things. And that's way overly simplistic when it comes to talking about winning the national championship more than once. But like Ryan Day, for the longest time, we're saying, man, he just can't win the big one. He can't get over the hump. They can't this, they can't that. And then he wins a national title his 6th year ever being a head coach in the sport of college football. It's often forgotten now because of all the success that he's had. But, y'all, this was the same discussion a lot of people had around Kirby Smart for a minute. Hey, Kirby, I don't know. Can he beat Saban? I don't know if he's the guy at Georgia to get him to the mountaintop. Like, yeah, had some success in the regular season, but is he really the guy? And then he wins the national championship in his 6th year. And then in his 7th year was another national championship. Say, yeah, well, JD had Stetson Bennett kind of evolve and all that. They brought back a lot on offense. That's true, but, y'all, the offense wasn't really the calling card for that first national title team. For Georgia, that is. Go back and check the numbers. Georgia, going into that second national title run, was 96th in returning production. I don't know where Ohio State's going to fall, but I have a hard time believing they'll be a whole lot lower than 96. So the point I'm trying to make here is if it's not about talent, and it truly is about Ryan Day, I think he's reached that point where he knows what it looks like, he knows what it feels like, he knows what national title caliber football is, and not just from a conceptual level. Like Ohio State winning the whole darn thing this year should remove any doubt about Ryan Day. should remove any doubt about the culture they have internally at Ohio State, and should remove any doubt around if Ryan Day can do it again. Because, y'all, you do it once. I'm not saying you have this monster roster every single year and the pieces come together the way they did, but if it's not about talent, and it shouldn't be about talent, Ohio State will be in the mix every single year. Get them in the dance, have them get hot, and then you could have a result like you had this year. So, can Ohio State win the national championship next year? I get that they're betting favorite. We're not making a prediction right now, but could they do it? 110%. 110% they could do it, man. And I'll be very curious to see who wins that battle out of camp. Like, Julian saying, there was a lot of buzz around Julian saying, even in spring of last year, saying, hey, Julian Sayin might be the guy that actually ends up taking over for a Will Howard if he doesn't really dial it in, if he has some interception problems. Now, the year went how it went, but they're excited about Julian Sayin in Columbus. We'll see if he's the starter. So that's a nice little segue for us into our ranking for this Wednesday. This isn't something Caden and I have talked about, but I wanted to talk to you about this actually, Caden, as we jump into a new season, if you will, of this show. I think it'd be fun to just rank something every Wednesday. Just rank everyone. I mean, we're going to just jump into a top 10 every Wednesday, stir the pot a little bit. Cato's nodding. We got a green light. Let's roll. So today, on this Ranking Wednesday, I want us to jump into the top 10 quarterbacks that are returning starters in college football. Two caveats there. One, it does not have to be a returning starter to their team. So we have a couple of guys now that started last year in college football that transferred somewhere else that we have in our top 10. The second part is just me reemphasizing what the prompt is. This is returning starters. So Julian Sayin, I just told you, he could be a guy that ends up winning Ohio State the national championship next year. He could be a top 10 quarterback in college football, but he didn't start last year. So therefore, he is not going to be on this list. Arch Manning, same deal. He could be awesome next year. He started some games for Texas, but he was never truly like the QB1 for Texas when it came to what they were in 2024. So with that out of the way, let's go from 10 all the way up to 1, and we'll unpack this list together. Make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. College football, nothing but college football all year round. At number 10, you got SMU's Kevin Jennings. And this dude, man, he's too good to not be in the top 10. Say what you want about SMU in the way they looked against Penn State. Say what you want about Kevin Jennings, the way that he looked against Penn State. If it was purely for me off of just like most electric watch, Kevin Jennings, the way that he's dynamic in the open field, the way that he is, I think, kind of going to progress as a passer as he gets further under the Rhett Lashley tutelage. Him cutting down on turnovers, I believe he had somewhere in the neighborhood of like 11 interceptions last year. If he cuts down on those and continues to, like what I just said, evolve as a downfield thrower and just takes another level up in the SMU offense under Rhett Lashley, again, like Kevin Jennings, SMU might be right back in the playoff, and we could be talking about SMU being a two-time playoff appearance. Kevin Jennings at number 10. At number 9, we'll get some pushback. It's more than fun. Whenever you make a list, you're wrong already. At number 9, I got Nico Ansah, Tennessee quarterback. Now, this is me. I hate the stock analogy. Y'all know that. This is me holding my Nico Ansah stock. And the tough part with Nico, when you try to make sense of what he is as a quarterback and what he is, in 2025, the expectations for him coming into 2024 was he was going to light the world on fire. Tennessee would score 40, 45 a game. He was going to win the Heisman Trophy. Like all of this just hype for my guy. And for anybody, that's impossible to live up to, much less as a first-year starter in the toughest conference in all of college football, right up there with the Big Ten. So, for Nico, I think the thing with him is he still had a really good year. Like, did he win the Heisman Trophy? No, but Tennessee made the playoff. I think if you're looking at what he did in terms of, like, situationally making plays, the game against Alabama is one you point to and say he grew up in a massive way. Like, Nico Ansah last year, with what Tennessee had around him defensively, he was good enough. Now, offensively, I wonder if maybe he has a little bit more in the tank that receiving core wasn't able to access. I guess we'll never know. For him, I need to see that next step in 2025 to put him higher on this list. But going into 2025, just based on what he did last year, I feel pretty confident having him at 9. So Nico Ansah for us sitting in at number 9. At number 8, Arizona State's Sam Leavitt. Now, a lot of people got to see him for the first time against Texas in that playoff game. You know who he reminds me of is J.J. McCarthy. Maybe not so much as like an actual like player, but the persona. Like we got the chance to chop it up with him a couple times throughout their playoff run a year ago, and just like confident, swaggy, kind of got an edge to him. To me, that's Sam Leavitt. Sam Leavitt is exactly who I would want my quarterback to be if I were building a quarterback. Good size, mobile, but just like an insane level of competitive juice, and again, the self-belief, like all those things, talking smack during the week heading up to the game against Texas, has to back it up. I like Sam Leavitt a lot. And with Jordan Tyson coming back to Arizona State and the trajectory of where Kenny Dillingham has the Sun Devils rolling right now, no Cam Scatterbo, going to have to ask more of Leavitt, but I think Sam Leavitt very quietly had one of the better years in college football last year. I think he set up for a massive 2025. Now, this is one at number 7 that people are going to put him a lot higher on their list based on potential, and that's totally cool. This is not a potential list. If this was about potential, you probably have this guy at number 1 or 2, and you probably have Nico top 3. So with that being our table setter, DJ Lagway from Florida, for me, is at number 9. And before you throw something at your television screen, like this to me was just the first few scenes of a movie. And this is also coming from somebody that has Florida in their preseason way too early top 10. Now, will Florida be top 10 when we roll around to the fall? We'll see. But like my point being, we just got a very, very brief snippet of what DJ Lagway is able to be at Florida. And Florida, obviously under him, took massive strides. The way they finished the year, they were, I think, as exciting as anyone else in all of college football in terms of promise and potential. Like there's a lot of reason to be fired up in Gainesville because of DJ Lagway. I think he's going to be really good. I keep giving that preface. I also want to make sure I say this, though. Like we've got a very, very small sample size. This is still really hard. Florida still has a very difficult schedule. It's still the SEC. There's still going to be a learning curve. Do not be surprised if it takes a second for DJ Lagway to be Superman at Florida. Now, he could just throw the cape on from day one and have a full offseason now under his belt, in addition to last year's offseason, I suppose, and maybe he just hits the ground running. But 12 touchdowns, 9 interceptions through the air. I need to see a little bit more before we move him higher. But again, he definitely deserves to be on this list. We have him at number 7. Number 6, our first transfer. So returning starter to college football, transferring from Washington State to Oklahoma, John Mateer. He might be the most volatile player on this list, in my opinion. Like John Mateer, it wouldn't shock me if he dropped out of this top 10 after next season, or if he was a guy that shot all the way up to like top 3 territory. I think there's that much that we are going to learn about him because he played a G5 schedule. But y'all, you know Hooper when you see one. Tore it up. Like 44 total touchdowns in the neighborhood of 4,000 total yards, over 800 rushing yards. Like, yeah, I don't care who that's against, man. I think he is the change agent in Norman. I've told you I think he's worth 2 to 3 wins. I think he's exactly what they need right now to kind of revive that offense, give them some new juice, have some mobility to hopefully make up for what you are potentially growing on the offensive line. Also, the fact that he's going over there with his former offensive coordinator, he's going to be the one getting everybody on the same page. He's not hitting campus in Norman. He's learning where all the food spots are. He's not learning the offense. He's teaching the offense. That's massive. And I cannot wait to see what he does next year in the SEC. For us, John Mateer at 6. At number 5, I got Drew Aller. Now, to me, Drew Aller is kind of like that February break that every college, for some reason, gives out. It's like a weird long weekend. You're not 100% sure why you have it. You're not 100% sure what to do with it. I don't know what to do with Drew Aller because last year it had some great moments. I think you look at some throws he made against Boise State where he's just dime dealing and dropping it in a bucket, and there's moments where, like, hey, if that receiver comes down with that catch, Drew Aller's stat line looks a whole lot better. And I also, on one hand, could see him being a top quarterback on this list when it's all said and done. Could see him being the first quarterback drafted off this list when it's all said and done. Could also make a case for him having like one of the most just like natural arm talents on this list. So I feel that way on one hand. That's why I have him at 5. But if you're arguing why Drew Aller should be higher on this list, and if you are, here's my answer. Show me the one game where I'm supposed to be absolutely amped about Drew Aller. Show me the one game where it's like, hey, turn on these 4 quarters of film that tells you who he is. Have him at whatever number you want, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever. The Oregon game, yeah, it did a great job against Oregon, allowing that Penn State offense to stick around and trade blows. But he also in that game had, multiple interceptions? The USC game, he went nuts. 391. Also threw 3 picks. He had one game against a Power 4 team with over 300 yards. That was against USC. So I don't know exactly what he is just yet because he doesn't have any receivers. Now, Tyler Warren was a dog for him last year, and I think we got to see some of the good, but I'm not 100% sure where I want to put Drew Aller. Potential ability, all that for sure, but based on the sample size we have right now, based on actual football games he's played, I need to see a little more to put him at, ahead of 5. But for us, number 5 going into 2025. And again, all these quarterbacks are awesome. If you're a top 10 guy going into next year, we think pretty highly of you. But Drew Aller, there'll be pushback on him being higher, so that's why we have that big discussion. But for me, Drew Aller at 5 on this list. Now, at number 4, we got another transfer. Carson Beck, transferring from Georgia to Miami. And I kind of smirk a little bit because I know what the mentions will look like, and that's totally fine. And a lot of people will point to what last year was. Hey, he had 12 picks. Georgia didn't win the national championship. Carson Beck didn't have nearly the year we thought he should have. Well, the year that you thought he should have versus the year he had, I don't think we need to dock him based on what the expectations were preseason. Like, I understand he was supposed to be the number 1 overall pick and is supposed to win the Heisman Trophy and all that, but like he's still at a top 10 QBR in all of college football. I believe his completion percentage would have been massively higher should he not have had a receiving core that led America in drops. Like, we also saw what he was a year ago with real weapons around him. With the McConkey and Bowers, dude's all SEC. So as much as you want to talk down on what last year was for Carson Beck, I hear you. I don't even think you're incorrect for having an objection, but I just think there needs to be equal weight to maybe the fine print of what this year was in addition to what last year was. I don't think Carson Beck just forgot how to throw a football. I'm really excited to see what he looks like in that Shannon Dawson offense. At number 3, I got Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik, man, the biggest glow up on this list. If we had made this list a couple years ago, he would not have been on it. I would have probably had him a good bit further down. The game he had against Texas, first, he had a great year. Like, Cade Klubnik played a very, very solid season this year. He improved, I've said it many times, almost 1,000 yards when it comes to his production through the air. That's one. But that game against Texas, where they are loaded with dudes that are going to play on Sundays, and for him to just take it to them, to be the pressure applier, that to me told me a lot about the skill set of Cade Klubnik, told me a lot about the intangibles of Cade Klubnik. I feel good with him leading me into battle, man. I think that's one of those trends for him in 2025 where he gets another year in the system and his best weapons also get another year in the system. They were true freshmen last year. If he's doing that last year, still getting his feet wet with his best, again, weapons, for my money at least, outside of the tight end and outside of Williams, for Wesco and more to get another year, I think he's about to have a massive 2025, and I really like Clemson going into next year. I'll leave it at that. And number 2, we call him the Gumbo Gunslinger, Garrett Nussmeier. Before you push back, this is a dude now going into I guess it was end of October. He was being talked about as being the number 1 quarterback in this upcoming draft class. Now, he obviously came back. I understand Shooter Sanders and Cam Ward exist. I'm not telling you that was my take, but I am saying you go check the Twitter sphere, you go check what NFL people are supposedly saying. They liked Garrett Nussmeier. And so what he did last year in itself was impressive. Like, threw for over 4,000 yards, and I mean, had a big day, or a big year rather, statistically. But it's more impressive when you look at what else he had around him. Like, they were a 60% of the time throw the football team. They had no run game behind him. It was all on Garrett Nussmeier. And we saw that multiple times sort of be the Achilles heel for LSU. I can't wait to see what he does if they are able to build some more around him and keep defenses a little bit more off balance. The pushback will also come from, well, JD, the interceptions, you got to cut down on those. You definitely do, but when you throw it 41 times a game, you leave yourself a little more exposed to have a higher interception number than some other folks across the country. Same deal with Carson Beck. They threw it 37 times a game. Like, both of these operations now are winging it around, and that's going to, in some ways, open the door for more poor decisions to happen. So Garrett Nussmeier for me at number 2. I really, really can't wait to see what he does if they get some more around him in the run game. And number 1, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. If you were drafting quarterbacks that are returning to college football, Lenora Sellers from South Carolina is my number 1 pick. Hear me clearly. This dude is not Cam Newton. He gets comped to Cam Newton a lot, but he is the closest thing when it comes to physical giftings that we've seen since Cam Newton. And y'all, that sounds hyperbolic. I really don't think it's that much of a stretch. Now, does he end up having a Cam Newton kind of season next year where he goes and wins the Heisman Trophy? I don't know, but I think it's possible. I think he's that good. I think when you watch him on Saturdays and you're sitting down at home watching the broadcast, you have a certain, I think, sense when he drops back and gets a rush. The play never feels dead for Lenore Sellers. You always feel like something is about to happen where he breaks a tackle, he breaks contain, he does something. You always feel like you're about to watch something special when that dude's playing quarterback. And there's only a handful of players that I can remember throughout my lifetime having that feeling when I watched them play college football. Lenore Sellers is in that group that I would, again, put in with a Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel. We'll throw massive names out there. Not comping them, but I'm saying I don't think physically in the feeling you get watching him, I don't think he's all that far removed from what a Cam Newton would be. So, to recap it for you here, our top 10 quarterbacks returning to college football next year as starters. Portal guys are included in this. Kevin Jennings from SMU at number 10. Nico Iamaleava holding our stock. I think the expectations make it tough to get a true gauge on what he was last year. You think he was awesome or you think he wasn't so good at all? Let him to the playoff. I think he's good enough. Nico at number 9. Sam Levitt at number 8. DJ Lagway at number 7. I've seen a few scenes of the movie. It's a good movie. I can't wait to watch the rest, but I've just seen a few scenes. I'd love to put him higher off potential. He probably is in that discussion for number 1, but DJ Lagway for us, on a small sample size, at number 7. John Mateer at 6. Drew Aller, not 100% sure what to do with him, so we got him at 5. Carson Beck at 4. Give a lot of credit now to the year he had before last year at Georgia. I don't think that's something we should just ignore. Cade Klubnik at 3, biggest glow up on this whole list. Garrett Nussmeier at 2, and Lenore Sellers at number 1. As always, let us know, though, man. Let us know your top 10. Let us know what you think about this list. I always say this, whenever you make a list, you're wrong. You should put a list out there to the masses, put a list out there on social media, put a list on YouTube. You are already wrong, so I'm encouraged to hear from y'all and excited to hear where we are wrong together. Again, Ranking Wednesday. I think it's going to be fun. There's some juice there. So the party rolls on. Now, speaking of parties, probably a good little party on Austin, or in Austin, I was going to say on 6th Street. They party on 6th Street a good amount. I know that much. Not firsthand, but from what I understand. Steve Sarkisian is locking it down with Texas. They have got him signed to an extension. This coming on the heels of some buzz around like, well, hey, if I'm an NFL team, I might give Steve Sarkisian a call. We said this before. It would be malpractice if you're an NFL team to not at least kick the tires on what Steve Sarkisian is as a head coach. Because when he got to Texas, that was a job that, folks treated like the plague. It was like, hey, it's a big brand, but it's very tough to win there because the boosters put their hands all in the deal, and it's not a situation where you're going to be able to have success. There's so many things you have to fight against. The Texas job always will be attractive because of the brand, but there was a point there where that was kind of the discussion around it of like, hey, buyer beware, head coach beware. Now, fast forward the tape a few years, Steve Sarkisian has got Texas having won the Big 12 on their way out, played for the SEC their first year in it, made the playoff in both the 4-team model and the 12-team model, and it looks like they are going nowhere but up. And also, they've been on an absolute tear when it comes to what they do on the recruiting trail. So, as a college football fan, I love this. I will always be pro keep great coaches, great people in college football for as long as humanly possible. That's my bias. But if I'm taking the bias hat off, I think from a career standpoint, if I'm Steve Sarkisian, this makes a lot of sense. Like the Texas job, we just talked about how difficult it is to win there when he got there. He's now pushed it up the hill and got that thing, from what I can understand, firing on all cylinders, takes some maintenance. Like he's got that. He did the hardest part of the Texas job already. Now they're winning. Now they're reaping the rewards. And I think they're right on the doorstep of being a team that ends up competing for and winning a national championship. Don't believe me, they took Ohio State to a spot where, to be honest, they probably should have pushed them to overtime. We saw Ohio State have the confetti drop on them on Monday night. Like, Texas is not far off. Now, they got to keep reloading and keep rebooting and all those things, but give Steve Sarkisian a ton of credit for pushing them to where they're at right now. If you were to go take an NFL job, one, you don't have the same amount of control. That's the first part of this. Second, you go to a job that is open for a reason. You have to do the whole thing over again. Third, again, it's Steve Sarkisian's a great coach. He's also a great CEO, which is why I love him in college. Like, if Steve Sarkisian were to go to the NFL, I don't know that he would be exercising all of his gifts, which isn't for me to say. If Steve Sarkisian wants to go to the NFL one day, more power to him. I see the appeal, the highest level of football. I get all that. But Steve Sarkisian, his skill set, I think fits best at the college level. And to put a finer point on it, What is a better job to have than to be the Texas Longhorns head coach when you're winning? Talk about control, talk about security, talk about financial support long term. Like there's a lot there for Texas that I think right now is approaching self-sustaining, and Steve Sarkisian deserves all the credit in the world for that. And he's pushed it to that place. So taking a job with an NFL team that probably has a high draft pick, probably has some dysfunction, that to me wouldn't make a lot of sense just purely from a next step standpoint. If Steve Sarkisian wants to go to the NFL, I think he's going to have his chance to pick and choose where that is and when that is. But the thing that I love so much about this whole story with Steve Sarkisian extending with Texas, the story reads, I believe it's from Brett McMurphy, he didn't even take an interview. Like, people are calling for Steve Sarkisian, he lets it go to voicemail. That, to me, from a Texas fan, makes me feel so good that, yeah, you're committed to a coach, but your coach is committed to you. And I think today in college football where, let's be real, it's gotten harder to win a national championship with the 12-team playoff. It's gotten harder to retain your roster with the NIL aspect and the portal aspect. It would make a lot of sense to say, you know what, actually I want to make as much, if not more, money in the NFL tomorrow. I want to probably spend more time with my family and friends and not recruit year-round. I'm going to go to the NFL, better quality of life, better this, better that. Steve Sarkisian's in on Texas. And to be unquantifiably in on Texas and then to have the quantifiables on the field to go for it, I think Texas is in a very exciting spot here going forward. Now, I do want to make sure we say this, though. We did our way too early preseason top 10, and we had Texas at number 1. And it wasn't a take that, hey, Arch Manning's your quarterback, though he should be awesome based on everything that we have known to be true about him to this point in his very, very young career. This is a take for me on what they are on the line of scrimmage. And so to put it simply, there's a lot of talent in Austin, Texas. With great talent, with great success comes great expectations. With great expectations comes great responsibility. So Steve Sarkisian knows what he signed up for. He knows what it is. But I just want us to sort of circle this point here. There's going to be a point in time where Sark will, in fact, have to win the national championship. I don't think that's a stretch to say. I think that's the expectation at Texas. I think that's the expectation for Steve Sarkisian. That has to happen at some point in time. This isn't me foreshadowing of, oh, he's going to get fired, doesn't win the national championship next year. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is this is a thing now that isn't just a situation where you win 10 games a year and everyone's happy. Sark's not happy with having an exit in the semifinals of the college football playoff. Johnny Barron last year definitely wasn't happy when he talked to us at Media Days when they lost to Washington, told us how upset everyone was. So the standard at Texas, just because you're re-signing the guy, it's not dipping. You're not getting complacent because you're keeping a head coach with you who hasn't yet won the national championship. But again, he's taken Texas to places that they were not at before he got there, at least in the modern era, has rebranded Texas, and Steve Sarkisian, again, deserves all the credit for what he is as a CEO, and selfishly, very, very grateful that he's staying in college football. Just for all of us, man. I'm glad we got to talk about Sark when it comes to what happens on fall Saturdays. That was a fun story. It's fun to see a couple of college coaches, and Marcus Freeman and Steve Sarkisian, be rumored in the NFL discussion, and then the dust settles, and they are not, in fact, in the NFL. I guess Marcus Freeman still technically could go, but all the discussion around him was with the Bears. So, again, I'd be surprised if either one of them left in the foreseeable future for the NFL. Just good to see college football people stay in college football. We've done this for a little bit now, but I think now is the right time for us to address the current status of Oregon Ducks football, an exit meeting, if you will. I'll give this preface because I do it every show. An exit meeting in the world of college football is, as a player, the season ends, you go meet with the head coach or your position coach to have a conversation around, hey, here's what happened last year. Here's what we see happening for you in the future. So right now, I want us to do that, an exit meeting, if you will, from 2024 to 2025 for a one Dan Lanning. And Oregon, I understand the way that it ended in the Rose Bowl being disappointing. We'll talk more about that later, but there's no possible way to look at what 2024 was for Oregon and not label it a massive success. First year in the Big Ten, win the conference. Run the table in the regular season. 12-0 and then make it 13-0 with the Big Ten title game, and you're the number one seed in the college football playoff. The unfortunate reality is you ran into the best roster in all of college football, a team that you beat now in the regular season, and it goes how it goes in the Rose Bowl, and it's unfortunate. And a lot of people now are hanging on the optics of that and saying, well, that's just Oregon for you, right? Isn't that just Oregon? Like Dan Lanning, they do great in the regular season, then the postseason rolls around, and they can't hang. And notice how I just grouped Dan Lanning into that discussion. That makes no sense to me. Like, I understand that people are upset with Oregon in the way that they have maybe whiffed at points in the modern era, if you're a college football fan, when it comes to some of these big postseason spots. But Dan Lanning wasn't a part of that. If you look at Dan Lanning, what he's done at Oregon, it's just a steady trajectory upwards like a Delta airplane taking off. Like, every single year, they improve on their win total. Every single year, top 10 class. This thing is going one direction. So to be impatient with Dan Lanning and say, I don't know if Oregon's really like that. I don't know if he's really the guy. I don't know if, Oregon's got this narrative around them. The Oregon narrative is the Oregon narrative. It's not Dan Lanning's narrative. And we talk about how Dan Lanning changed what Oregon is to begin with. Oregon also used to be kind of this team that was, that soft West Coast team, more flash, no substance. Not anymore. A bunch of trench monsters out there in Eugene. Why? Because of Dan Lanning. So I hate the 30,000-foot view of the optics of, well, they got boat raced by Ohio State, same old Oregon. No, not same old Oregon. Brand new Oregon. Brand new Oregon that won the Big Ten this year, the best conference in college football, a conference that also had the eventual national champion in it, and also last year's national champion, if we want to be honest about this whole thing. Look at the AP poll and all the Big Ten teams that were ranked in that thing. Like, Oregon is a real deal team with staying power, operation with staying power, program with staying power, whatever other label you want to put on them as to what they are, they got staying power. And so the tough part around how Dan Lanning is being perceived or being talked about right now, it's very much so like people in the South posting their engagement photos on social media. There's a certain way it looks, and there's a certain way that life really is. Like, the way that it looks is, oh my gosh, they're so happy, it's perfect, it happens so fast. They must be doing amazing. They might be doing amazing, but it's not how winning a national championship works. It's not just, oh, it happened so fast, it must be perfect. It must have just been smooth sailing for them the whole time. It's not real life. Like, we as college football fans, especially in this generation, when we craft this narrative around what Oregon football is, it's so warped because we saw multiple coaches win multiple national titles. Like, Nick Saban did his thing, Dabo Swinney won 2, Kirby Smart won 2, and so we're like, wow, it must be that easy. That must be how it is. That's not reality. It's not the social media picture-perfect post that you put up there. It's a thing that takes a long time, dude. Like Kirby Smart, I just told you, he won 2. There was a minute where he was being questioned as to could he win the big game before he won those 2. It took him 6 years at Georgia. Ryan Day just got the monkey off his back, won his first. It took him 6 years. Jim Harbaugh coached 13 years in college football before getting his first. 9 at Michigan. Had a pay cut, dude. It reduced my guy's contract when it comes to what he was making. Fights back, wins a national championship. Dabo Swinney took him 8 years at Clemson before he won one. So Dan Lanning, he's in his 3rd year at Oregon. Not even 40 years old yet. To define what he is as a head coach, or to craft this narrative around what Oregon football is based on who Dan Lanning is, it's so useless and so just, again, not based in reality. Oregon's going to be a player here for a long time. Now, at some point in time, you do get to a spot in the college football playoff where you got to go win a 4-quarter game and win probably 3 or 4 quarter games in a row, 3 or 4 4-quarter games in a row. But like, to say that there's this Oregon narrative around them not winning the big one, like, I would be very careful speaking too loudly when it comes to absolute narratives, because the absolute narrative around Ryan Day was the same thing: can't win the big one. Kirby Smart can't win the big one. They fold in the postseason, fold in the big game. Well, not the case anymore, as both those dudes have national championships, and I would be wildly surprised if Dan Lanning doesn't have a national championship for Oregon within the next 5 years. Full stop. Hey, appreciate y'all being dialed in here in Rankings Wednesday. I told y'all the travel day after the national championship is always a bit of a blender. Like, y'all heard or watched the show, I suppose, on our Tuesday hard count, and it was like we got back to the hotel, recorded till 4-ish in the morning. Happy to do it, absolute blast. And we get on the road the next day, get back home, wake up on Wednesday not knowing what day it is, and then we do a show in here. So we appreciate y'all being dialed in, man, and making this show what it is. If you haven't yet subscribed, we'd love to have y'all a part of this. We're just getting started. Just getting started. A lot of discussions between myself and Cato as to what kind of content we want to bring to y'all here in the future. If you've got an opinion on what that content looks like, it's open season, man. Get asked in the comment section. Let us know on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, all that. We want to hear from y'all because ultimately, man, this is y'all's show, and we're grateful to be able to host it and to be able to talk about college football for a living. So, with that being said, For Cato on the ones and twos, for myself, J.D. Piquel, you matter. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all.